So, okay, so today starting today, our discussion moderators will be Susanna and Dallin, who are online. So if the two of you will just coordinate through email and come up with some questions and get those to me. Do we have any IPSO announcements or any other announcements from any group?
Sign up for soup next week. We're a little short on people, so we'll sign up for that. That'd be great.
Make sure we are all well fed in IP&T. I don't think there's anything else. So we're grateful that Greg Danklef is able to be with us today. I'll just turn the time over to him to present tips for making a daily impact at work, it looks like. So if you'll join me in welcoming Greg to our seminar today.
Thank you. Yeah, excited to be here and talk about this. So one of the things I was just thinking about that might be helpful is just this is just some collection of some of the things that I've been thinking about and reading about lately, and just as I'm always looking to kind of figure out in whatever context, how can we really kind of do meaningful work and make sure that we're doing what we want to do. So anyway, we'll go through here. I've got we'll talk about this as we're going through. So I chose these words pretty deliberately in thinking about it. One of the things, first of all, is just thinking about this idea of daily. I wish I had something, a magic wand I could wave and just say all of the annoying things in your life will just be gone and you won't have to do any of those things. But the truth is that where we kind of win, I think, in our lives are the things that we do on a daily basis and do consistently. And so if we can kind of focus on that, that can help us just to kind of think about what's going on. And so anyway, sometimes I think we kind of need to reevaluate the type of work that we're doing, especially the things that we're doing day in, day out, and kind of look at those. Sometimes we get into a trap of thinking in a lot of ways, okay, how can I just do more? How can I just do more? And there's a limit. We have a limit. We're bounded by some sort of limit of what we can accomplish. I think we were given a time frame in the day for a purpose, that there's a limit on those, at least while we're here in life. And so, I think those are the constraints that we kind of have to think about and feel like, okay, why is this? And what is this trying to teach me? And so the daily idea is really important. And so I think sometimes we should, as we're thinking about work, school, all the things that we're trying to accomplish in a given day, we've got to kind of think about it or approach it sort of like how we do some of the other tasks that just are around in life. So for instance, there are some things like think about being on a farm, maybe. And look at this now. I always have a bit of a fondness for cows. We have cows that live behind my house. And they're rodeo cows, though. They're not really this kind of cow. They're a little mean, but they... still, I kind of watch and observe those. But think about life on a farm and what you're doing. If we were really effective or something, or if I were to turn this over to an entrepreneur or something and say, how do we figure out cow milking? They'd probably say, like, how can we milk cows once a week and just be done? We all know that's not possible. We just can't do it. Sometimes there's things that we have to do, like cows here, that we can't just get more productive at doing it. The cow's going to do what the cow's going to do, and there's kind of we just can kind of do what we can with that. It's a daily thing. It's something that just kind of has to be done. Kind of not unlike this other thing over here. How many of you have a pile like that at home of some sort, right? It's pretty common, that we have laundry. Laundry also never gets done. Okay, you're like, where are you going with this, Greg? I know, but we're never done. It's always something that's there, and even when you think you're done, you're not done. So we have to kind of, as we're thinking about our tasks and some of the things we have to do for, say, work or even just our hobbies and just the things that we're trying to accomplish in life. Sometimes we think, if I could just get more and more done, but the reality is, so many of the things that we have in life don't have really maybe an end. But also, we can't just infinitely get better and more efficient at that and try to kind of do more and more and more. And so, just like this, we've got to kind of think about what are we doing here. So, some of the things there are some things that we can batch. You can kind of do laundry, maybe pick one day or something and say maybe that's more efficient or something. And some things you can't. We just have to kind of look at that and kind of roll with it. But that kind of brings me to this thing. So there are things that are daily happening that we're going to do, and there's some daily maintenance things that we're going to be doing for work, and not all of them are fun, but they kind of have to get done, and we have to do those. So the other word I was thinking about here is the impact, though, and that's what I really wanted to kind of focus in thinking about this. And you know, we may not always. I mean, I guess there's some excitement in finishing that load of laundry or getting things put away. I always think about like yard work sometimes is kind of satisfying because at least at the end you can see the results, and that's kind of fun. And so there are some things they're little wins. But you know, you think about something that a lot of people do as part of their regular day, email. There's never an end to email. There's never, you're never going to be done. That's a depressing thought, isn't it? They're always just going to come and do that. But I don't think, you know, the idea of just saying, I'm going to get really good. We're going to talk about that at email. But you know, we have to do those things to a certain extent, but you know, you've got to make sure that we're having an impact as we're doing this. So, you know, what we want to do is kind of do fewer things maybe instead of more, but just try to make choices about how do these things like have an impact on the goals and things that we want to do it. Now, as one author put this, and I really like this, what I'm suggesting is that we want to make a shift from just being infinitely kind of just productive, kind of being on a hamster wheel of productivity, to this idea of impact. And so I really like this. We want to choose fewer but more important things. Or another way to look at this is less but better. And I think if we kind of think about that in terms of a mindset, and what we're looking at is, okay, I can't do everything in this day. I can't possibly do everything I want to do or have to do. So now I'm going to have to make choices. And I think that's what's happening here. So I wanted to share a few tips about how to kind of help us to say, how can we shift ourselves a little bit so that things that we're working on are a little bit more impactful, as opposed to just getting caught up in feeling like we're not doing nonstop laundry and email and so those things, which feel busy and have a sense that they're okay in themselves, but ultimately, you know, nobody at the end of their life is going to say, I really processed all those emails. You know, it's probably not going to happen. Okay, so the three ideas I had with this are, we're going to talk about kind of a tool called 3 Big Things. We'll talk a little bit about calendars, I know, and then we'll talk about focus and thinking about this. And so that's where we're headed as we're thinking about this. Okay, so first two are really around planning, kind of and thinking about how we're going to approach that. And then this last one is just kind of where are we going to focus and how are we going to make sure that it's impactful as we're thinking about that. So let's start with this first one. And I think this is an easy tool. I love this one. This has been super helpful for me. And really, it's very simple. And really what it is you write down the top 3 things to do the next day. So it's not really any more complicated than that. That's what I love about it. But it's super effective. It only takes a couple of minutes to do this. But this has been probably one of the single most helpful kind of life tips or you know, people have productivity hacks or whatever those are, but honestly, this has been one of the best things that's helped me kind of focus on those things that have an impact. So what do? Well, basically you just, at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, depends on which works for you best. I tend to find that at the end of, say, the workday or the end of the, you know, before I go to sleep, just kind of sitting down and just saying, and you could put this on in your phone, you could do it pad up. I'm pretty sure I found that you can actually buy pads that have these on it, or in any sticky note. Often I'll do this, but and basically you just say, okay, what are 3 things that if I could do those tomorrow that would really move me forward? So what this does is it just forces you to prioritize and say, okay, you know, starting with tomorrow, if I could get these 3 things, and you know, some days it might be 2. Or it might even be 1, but you're just kind of thinking and making a decision around what's really going to have an impact for me the next day. And then, you know, well, how it works or why it works here is because it is pretty simple. And now you think, does this really work? But it does, because you're focusing, which is one of the things that we'll be talking about. So you don't have to spend a lot of time. This isn't like a, hour-long planning session or anything. It's very current because it's just the next day. But it's one of those things that are really important. Also, what you're doing really is laying the groundwork here. It's kind of a mental creation for what your day is going to look like tomorrow. And so you can just kind of plan this out, and you don't have to plan out the entire extensive down to, small detail. My wife's an attorney, and for quite a while she had to be billable. Do you know what's the time increment that attorneys have to keep track of their time? 6-minute increments. Why? Any guesses?
Because they're so expensive.
Well, that is, but it's 1/10 of an hour. So they bill out in 1/10 of an hour of what they're gonna do. So, if they're $500 an hour. So yeah, 6 minutes, anyway, 6-minute increments. Now, we don't need to get to that point. That's what we're asking to do. That's a little bit crazy, and it drove her crazy, honestly. But what we're looking at is just saying, hey, looking at tomorrow, what are the top 2 or 3 things that if I could just make some progress on this and kind of be a little bit specific about that, that would be great. Okay, so what this just helps you to kind of prioritize what's going on before you kind of get into your study routine or your work routine or school, whatever it is, and that starts kind of pulling you in a number of different directions too. And so you're kind of helping yourself and reminding yourself what's important. And so just kind of moving forward with that. It really just helps you as you're doing this. And what I would suggest is, looking at this, when you're ready to kind of start working or on whatever it is that's you're working on, sitting at a desk or whatever it is you're doing, you're like, okay, let's look at these 3 things. What if I start on one of these? Okay, let's just get going. Even if it's just 10 minutes to get going, it just kind of does that. And I'm a big believer in momentum, that if you can just kind of get going and get started, that momentum can kind of help you in doing that. So, so the impact of this, I feel, is that you'll tend to spend time doing things that matter, and so it'll move those important things forward. And so we get easily distracted, and what we want to kind of do is sort of limit our work in progress, like the things that we're actively working on. If you're working on 10 different projects all at once, it's tough to make progress. So you're just trying to kind of focus the work that you're doing onto just a few things. So this is my first challenge, is to give this a try. So be thinking about this. You can also start maybe even mentally saying, what would be on my 3 things even for this afternoon or for tomorrow. And I think that's important. Now, as we're doing this, I think it's helpful to keep in mind just a kind of a general idea, is that planning is a useful tool. We should absolutely do it. Okay. I think it's important. We also need to recognize plans for what they are, meaning that a plan is a thought. It is a present moment statement of intent. And I know that some people will get really frustrated because they're like, I planned this whole thing and then something happened and it all different. That's okay. That is life. We do our best in the moment to set our intention for the future and kind of figure out, hey, here's what I would do. But we all know that things change. Somebody calls you and needs help, or you all of a sudden have a quiz you didn't anticipate, or whatever it is, you get an assignment from somebody and you're like, oh, that's I didn't anticipate that, but here we go. That's just how things will go, and we can reset and try again tomorrow on those. So don't beat yourself up if there are changes in plans. That's life. That's how we do that. So we do our best to kind of set an intention, but it's an intention. It's not a, we're not bound by some sort of blood oath to, do this. We're just doing our best to kind of lay the groundwork there. So I think that's an important thing too, as we're talking about this. Okay, so that's the first one, is that thing. It's a simple tool. I don't know. You got thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. Yeah.
Do you recommend not putting habitual things in there, or things that just will always happen?
Yeah, if you have a routine, I figure that's in your routine. So I think unless you're like, I'm It's like, I haven't brushed my teeth in 2 weeks, like maybe that should go back in there, but I think this is beyond just like kind of maintenance or kind of routine. Like if you have a morning routine or something and doing that, yeah, absolutely do that. I think I'm looking at more of like the projects or assignments or some of those things that you're working on, unless it's starting a new part of a routine or something, then that might be one of those. I like that question. So, any other questions about this? Has anybody tried something similar to this or? Yeah.
There's another idea out there called gains and goals, that you do 3 goals for the next day and then 3 things that you did well today.
I like
It kind
that.
of plays on the idea of the momentum you're talking about, that you can celebrate the successes even if they're little, and you can kind of get a feel for what level of success you should be striving for depending on the season in your life. And
Love that. You could flip the sticky note back over on the back and write, hey, what did I do this week? Yeah, we're 3 gains. I like that. And I think gratitude is a huge, or recognizing kind of what you've done. I like that. So thinking about that. Sure. Okay. Yeah, so that's one thing. I honestly, like I do a lot of I do a lot of Franklin Covey stuff that we teach. I do kind of work with the getting things done system and everything, and there's a lot of good things with that. This has been consistently one of the things that's probably been the easiest to kind of keep going, because it is so simple. And I can definitely tell a difference when I have just tried to prioritize and just keep it simple. So it's not 9 things, 3, just 3 things. Sometimes I do them all. Sometimes I do none. Usually I do 1 or 2, but that's okay. Like, you're just trying to move forward and make sure that you're trying to get those things that are important to you on your agenda and kind of keep it mentally where it should be. Yeah, so that's the first one. All right, so the second one is just looking at your calendar. Now, and this, you may be calendar wizards, that's fantastic in doing this, but if you think about how you're using your calendar, sometimes people are really good at this, sometimes people are just using it for a little bit of everything. And this could be whether it's on your computer or a paper. How many of you use a paper calendar? Just curiously. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, you just got to find something that works for you. It's an essential tool for what we're doing. Because we have this time constraint on us, it's really important to kind of keep track of those things. Often people will use some sort of a thing like Google or Outlook, whatever. And so it doesn't really matter what those are. I think increasingly I'm more reliant on my calendar, my phone, than anything. And just making sure that all those things kind of come in there. But the idea is that you kind of have to think about what impact is this calendar having on my day? So as we're looking at it now, I like this idea. So this is from James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits. Has anybody read that one? Just out of curiosity. Okay. Yeah, a lot of good ideas that he has around that. It's a lot of fun to go through and think about. So I'd highly recommend that. But I like this idea where he says, it's rarely doing the work that is hard. It's starting the work. Once you begin, it's often less painful to continue working. That is why in the beginning, it is often more important to build the habit of getting started than it is to worry about whether or not you're doing enough. Okay, so remember, I'm trying to help us with this. Am I doing enough kind of thought? And I should just be doing more and everything. But it's that starting. It's kind of getting that momentum or kind of getting moving with this. And so our calendars can really help us with we use those 3 big things. We use our calendars to kind of help us getting started in the beginning of our day. That can be super helpful as we're doing this. Okay, so let's remind ourselves of our calendar. Hopefully it doesn't look too much like this. Can you imagine? It's crazy. But although I have seen people's calendars and I look at this and I think I get a headache just looking at something like that, right? That's too many. That's like the 6-minute increment almost into looking at something like that. But also calendars sometimes become a bit of a catch-all for us. Do you put your kind of to-do items on your calendar? Yeah, and why? Why do you put them there instead of a to-do list? You thought about that?
I'm in the habit of using my calendar. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna check it, right? Even if I say, okay, I've got to pick up I've got to pick up my suit over at the laundry thing on 9th East there, and I've got that, and I might say I would like to pick it up today. So I'm like, okay, at 10 o'clock, and I may or may not do it at 10 o'clock, but it's on my calendar to remind me. And often we'll do that because we check it. We know we're going to check our calendar. And that's just the tool that we're really accustomed to looking at and kind of to see what's coming up. When do I have a meeting? When do I have class? You know, what's going on? And so sometimes we will put things on there that maybe would potentially be better in another spot, like a to-do list or something. So anyway, one of the things that we can do is just kind of think about, be kind of thoughtful about this and try to say, you know, if I can keep this more to the firm and fixed, meaning what actually has a time component to it, you know, class schedule that has a time component. You know, you can't just do that at any time you want. So that's an important calendar thing. But you know, when I'm going to do these 5 things that I'd like to do today or these errands, that may or may not really work there. I should probably kind of keep that in a different spot and keep my calendar to kind of help me just understand what's kind of the hard landscape that's going to guide my day. So if you're looking at your 3 things, I would suggest doing that first thing in the morning. Like, look at your 3 things. Then look at your calendar. Okay, what kind of events do I have that are time bound? You know, looking at that, that gives you an idea of kind of what's going on in your day, and that can help you. So, and then you can say, okay, I've got, you know, an hour before a class, or I've got, you know, I've got a meeting at 3, so I've got some space in there. Now, where am I going to fit in these 3 things? What am I going to look at there? And so that's kind of the idea here, you know, sometimes we just need to get started with those things. And just like James Clear was saying, and, you know, sometimes it's just helpful to get us started with those 3 things, even if it's just, you know, opening the file or, you know, just opening a Word document. Okay, I've got it open. I'm going to type a sentence. Let's get started. Sometimes it's that start that really helps us. So that can really help us. Now, the other thing I would say that's important with this is to make sure, as you're looking at your calendar, to pay yourself first. That's kind of an interesting concept. What are we talking about here? If only I could pay myself in money, that would be fantastic. But what we're looking at is saying, looking at my calendar, my day, what are the things that are important to me, maybe I've identified, and then say, when am I going to choose to do these things, as opposed to letting other people kind of dictate my day. And so here's an example is, you know, if you check your email, that's going to automatically just take over your day in general. You know, if you, you know, you start looking and then all of a sudden you're working out of that and the 3 things just kind of get shoved to the side. It's really easy. And so we're on other people's agendas there. And so one of the things you can do is just kind of say, all right, where am I going to need to do this? If you've got study time, you're like, okay, I've got to study for a test coming up. Well, when am I going to do that? Okay, if I'm going to pay myself first, I'm going to identify maybe a block of time that I want to do that and say, okay, here, where do I start? Where am I going to put this in? So start thinking about that and then have that kind of in your calendar, as opposed to just kind of saying, well, I'll get to it when I can. And like I said, you don't have to plan everything. But the things that are super important, let's try to create the space for it, as opposed to hoping that it will happen at some point. Okay. So yeah, I think it's helpful to schedule time on your calendar to do specific tasks. But the caveat here is that if you find yourself dismissing or snoozing that over and over, you have to take a step back and say, okay, is this something that should belong on here? Maybe this isn't the right spot for it. And so that's an important thing. So I like the idea of, for instance, just one example here is I had a project that I was trying to work on with another person, and you were trying to create something, and you know, kept kind of going back, and I just kind of kept putting it off because there were other things that were going on, and I finally realized I need to just schedule time to work on this project. And so I set it aside, created a meeting with this other person, and we worked on it right then instead of trying to find time to do that project. And that's ultimately what ended up helping us move forward. Yeah.
We have a couple of comments on the chat about people having like kids' calendars and their husbands' calendars kind of combine on one, and they just, maybe you could speak to some advice on managing multiple people's kind of agendas.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to know, and I think that's where, like, for me, all of my calendars kind of converge on my phone. So I can look in there and see, okay, what are all these things? Okay, like tumbling today, 3:30. That's happening. Piano practice or piano lessons are tonight. You know, So I have those things that are happening. I can look at, all the things on my wife's calendar and everything. But I think what's nice is that you can easily kind of turn on and off those calendars. So knowing it, like, okay, what's happening in the day? What are the things that I need to be aware of? But then if I can kind of step back and say, okay, now I want to just look at mine. Where are my spaces? And I think that's one way to do it. But because I think it is important to coordinate and have those. But I find kind of turning those on and off can be super helpful just to see the versions of that of what's going on. So hopefully that helps. I don't know. Anybody else have some ideas around that? I mean, we've got to use them. Calendars are super important. These, the other thing that I find that I have to actually schedule, or else it takes over my day again, is email. And so what I try to do is batch that. That is unlike milking cows, we can batch email. So that's one thing that we can do is we can, well, see, there's a, can't get to. Sorry, well, it'll stay there, it's fine. So we want to like find specific tasks. So like, for instance, like I said, email, like sometimes I'll say, okay, at the top of the hour, I'll check this. And then I will work on that for 10 minutes or something. Or I'll say, I'm going to set aside this hour to kind of catch up and do that. What I try to avoid is just going through it all day, all the time. Because that, I mean, as you are trying to do focused work and try to really get into that, I mean, there's nothing that really derails it more than ding, and you're looking, oh, what is that? And it's like, oh, Pizza Pie Cafe is having another sale. Like that had nothing to do with what I'm doing right now, but now I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? And then you have to get back into it. I always like to think of, so I grew up here in Utah, and my mom's from Dallas, and so we would travel there, once or twice a year, and that's a long drive. It was like 24 hours of driving or so. And so my dad was real strict about bathroom breaks and everything, because he knew every time you stop the car, you pull off, you're adding like a half hour, no matter how fast you try to be, to the overall trip. And it just takes a while to get back up to speed and all those different things. And what we see is our brains are even worse at that, at kind of getting back on topic and kind of getting into that flow state and looking at that. So if you can eliminate those distractions and kind of say, I'll check that, at a specific time. I find that can be really helpful for doing that. Okay, a couple other things just as far as calendars go. Any of you use some sort of calendars or labels, sorry, colors, categories of labels? Yeah, those can be really helpful. You can use those. I know some people that use in Outlook, at least, there's categories for different projects. And so you can look at your calendar and say, oh, here's the different projects that are happening. Just sometimes, we can use those cues for our brains to really help ourselves and say, oh, like, color can differentiate for us and look at that. So anyway, that can be helpful. Another thing that I found that's really helpful is just to add information to an appointment. So maybe if you're going to call somebody at a certain time, put the phone number in there too. So you're not like, wait, what was the number? You just include the information. I mean, it's pretty easy now with the modern systems that we have of being able to put in locations and all those different things. Nothing better than saying, oh, I've got a wedding reception I'm going to drive to, and the address is right there. And then I just click, it pulls up the navigation instead of, it's beautiful. So preload that stuff, make it easy on yourself later. The other thing that's pretty nice is for most of them, like I know in Outlook, you can just take an email and drag it to the little calendar icon, and it turns it into an appointment. And it has all the information that was in that email pre-populated in there, so you don't have to copy and paste. Awesome. Google may not do that. I have to experiment with that, but I don't know. So sometimes that can be really helpful. But I think in Google you can turn an email into an appointment as well. So just little tools you can do that. And then the other thing I mentioned this too is like if you keep kind of snoozing an appointment and just kind of dismissing or kind of moving it. So that's telling you something, something's happening there that you want to get rid of. I want to get rid of that. I don't know what screen that's on, but no. All right. The other thing too that I found super helpful, at least in my office, and kind of looking at this is using a Calendarly. Is anybody familiar with that? Yeah, and what does it do essentially?
So Calendly,
Uh-huh.
so it makes it to where people can go to a link to schedule an appointment with you on your calendar, and it immediately loads that appointment in on your calendar, and it can also send like a text reminder to them and to you and all that good stuff.
What I love about this is it eliminates like all these back and forth. Well, what about 1 o'clock? No, that doesn't work for me. What about 12 o'clock? You know, it's like going back and forth. This has been super helpful. When I was the last round of kind of hiring interviews that I did, I just set up something like this and said, here's the times that I have available. Pick one that works for you. And there it was. It was great. So, I mean, there's so many good tools that you can use around your calendar that can kind of help you save time and effort in doing that. So the other thing too is on your thing is just keep some open space. You know, so some time, we don't want to go back to that, you know, that picture of the calendar that I had where it's just, you know, every single moment is accounted for. You can't possibly live up to that. You know, we forget stuff like bathroom breaks and, you know, when somebody stops by and wants to talk to you about how bad that football game was. And, you know, all those different things, you got to build some space in there. So try not to overschedule yourself. Remember, we're focusing on hopefully those 3 things. And so anyway, that's good. So yeah, don't use this as a to-do list. It can help you if you are kind of using it for the things that are firm and kind of helping you to get to those important things, the things that'll make it happen. Okay, so could be the impact here is I think that the calendar, if it's done right and you're looking at it, gives you a visual on what is important to you. That's kind of an interesting idea. Like I said, it should be kind of that hard landscape that you're working within to kind of accomplish those things that you need to or want to do. But the other idea here is that if you glance at your calendar, you should kind of get an idea of what's important to you. You know, if you know, your schoolwork is important to you, it should probably show up on your calendar. You know, like I'm spending time doing that. If you said, hey, family is really important to me, does the family show up on your calendar anywhere? You know, those are some things that are just kind of an interesting visual in thinking about this. Okay. Calendars are interesting. Time is weird. We all know that. Like, you know, as you think about, anybody had that situation where you're like, wow, this week went so fast. I don't know what happened. Or this day is really long. That doesn't make it. My whole theory is that time is unnatural to us because we're eternal beings, and it's an artificial constraint that's put on us. So our spirit's just confused. But that's my theory. We're looking at, and so we have to kind of learn to figure that out. But I think there's something in that. And I think that we're one of the reasons we're here is to kind of learn to make good choices about what we're doing and to kind of look at some of those constraints and figure out, you know, what we can do to kind of move forward and without saying, well, it's happen anytime, you know, we have all of eternity. So anyway, I think this can help us. Something else, just as we're thinking about just plans in general, I kind of mentioned this, but our plans sometimes can be perfect. We can come up with it. Has anybody come up with a great vacation plan? Anybody done that? Any of you like real planners, like you get that agenda going and everything? I saw once, and of course this was in the College of Engineering. This engineer, and he was taking his family on a trip to Europe, and this was like, I can't even describe how long this was, but he had like the entire trip on a spreadsheet, like down to like it was like 5-minute increments. Like he had it down, all the money that was going to be spent. I mean, it was amazing. I looked at that and I was like, there's no way I could do that. But I mean, for him that worked. But I was like, what happens if the bus is late or, you know, something? And he's like, oh, you know. But no, it was amazing. And it was a perfect plan, right? But we all know that something happens, like the bus will be late, or the passport, you know, somebody lost their passport, or, you know, what happens. And so we know that life is not perfect. And life is incredibly short. So on average, it's estimated like the average person gets about, does anybody know how many weeks? We're going to take a guess. It seems to be around 4,000 weeks. Okay. That's weird when you put a number to it, right? Like 4,000 weeks. So, and if you're, I don't know, if you're like in your 40s, you're like around 5,000 weeks now. You know, so then you start looking at that and you're like, oh boy, okay. Just it's really kind of sobering a little bit to do that. But we don't want to, but the idea is that time is short. Like we don't have all day, you know, to do this. But we have to, so, you know, when we're looking at our calendar and we're setting our intentions, we know we have to prioritize things. we know that we have to kind of focus on things that are probably more important because there's an infinite number of things that we could do that are good. We can't do them all. I'd suggest Elder Oaks has a really great talk, Good, Better, Best, from I don't know how long ago, but because again, time, I don't know. But but it's really good. And he talks about like there are good things that we can do, so many things, good things, so many that are better, but we really kind of want to focus a little bit on what are the best things. So anyway, so here's the thing with this though too, is that life is also full of compromises. Because we have that constraint on us, we can't possibly do all that thing. And how many of you took like Econ 110? Take that class, or would still have nightmares about it? Yeah. You know, one of the things we learned about there is opportunity costs. Everything that we do, every choice that we make means that we can't do the other things that we were hoping to do there. And so we kind of have to look at that and say, you know, there's trade-offs really for every choice that we make, and that's okay. That's just fine. We have to kind of look at our options, make the best choice that we can, knowing that things are going to kind of change, and be okay with that. We can't control everything, right? That's that life part. We just can't. We know that we can't control the weather. Anybody had a weather incident that ruined your plans? Yeah, I mean, this does just happen, right? We can't control that yet. You know, there's you know, we can't control other people's actions. You know, there's so many things that are out there that we don't have control over. So we need to be okay with that and say, yeah, I had these plans. This is what I'm trying to work towards. My calendar, I've got it all scheduled out. But you know, things can change. And so kind of building that into and being able to pivot a little bit is probably just going to help us in life, make sure that we don't get super frustrated as we go through this and try to do it.
We have another question on the chat. Someone asked, how does having a strict calendar affect your self-confidence and dependability on planning beforehand?
Well, hopefully I just answered that a little bit. I wouldn't say a strict calendar. I think it's just more of what are those things that are time bound, you know, and I need to be aware of that. That's my landscape. Now, within that landscape, where are my spaces and where can I work on those things that are really important? And so knowing that, I will probably have to have some flexibility in that because we can't control everything. That's probably a good thing. Okay, so that's the second thing. We talked a little bit about calendars, the tool. Okay, so now the last one is just kind of thinking about focus and focusing our mindset and thinking about this. I like this. This is from this is kind of a Stephen Covey concept, or we teach this in our 7 Habits workshop. But we talk about, he talks a lot about this circle of influence and circle of concern. And if we look at the things that we could be concerned about in life, there's a lot, right? We have a lot of things that are happening in the world right now. And some of them are good, some of them are terrible. And there's a lot of things in between that are just, you know, tough, you know, and you know, some of those things we really can't do a lot about. And so where we have to focus is on where can I make an impact, or where can I make a difference? So you know, we can really get caught up in just worrying about things like I can't do a lot to control the price of gas. That's just I don't have that kind of power. But if I look at what's my circle, what do I have control over? Well, I have control over the amount of distance that I drive to a certain extent, or what I drive, or whether I might, you know, work remotely a little bit more, or, you know, whatever it is. There's certain things that I can probably do. I could shop around a little bit for that extra penny off. You know, so there are some things, they're small, but that's where if I focus in those areas where I can make a difference, we can make a difference, as opposed to just kind of throwing our hands up and saying, I don't know what to do. So my boss and I are always talking about this. So, sometimes we will get, and this happens at work, of course, and different things. It's just that you'll get somebody like a vice president and say, here's what's going to happen. Like, okay, like I didn't anticipate that. And sometimes I can't control what kinds of policies are happening, or you know, the way that people, what the choices that people make. What I can control, my area of influence, are my reaction to it, and kind of what I'm going to do as a result. What can I do? And so I think if we continue to kind of focus this, our mindset on, okay, where can I have influence? Where can I kind of exert some of the ability that I have to do? And kind of be okay in doing that and kind of doing those our part there. So, you know, we want to remind ourselves every day that we can have an impact, but we likely may not just change the entire world, you know, all in one day. But we can do things within our circles of influence there. And that's where I think if we focus our efforts there, it'd be helpful. Now, in fact, this is Angela Duckworth came and spoke to campus in a forum not too long ago. And I love this. She shared this. She said that research shows that focusing your attention on what you can change is tremendously positive asset. People with this positive attitude are more likely to seize opportunity, to persevere, and to accomplish their goals. So kind of looking at, you know, where can we focus our attention and where can we actually make a change that can be helpful? So what can we do? And so those are things that we can kind of influence, and that's a good way to approach this. And that I think that's helpful. Another person that I really admire is Liz Wiseman, and so she's a graduate of BYU and has ran Oracle's kind of employee development program there, and then has written a couple of books and everything. But one of her books, which I can't recommend enough, is called Impact Player. Impact Players, I love this. And so some of the ideas from there I think are important too, as we're thinking about this mindset of how do I have an impact? You know, it's right there. But a few things that she recommends that I feel like, at least for me, have really changed the way I approach things. Is one of the best things that you can do to have an impact and be an impact player. Not just not just a person that does good work, but a person that has impact, that can kind of exert influence in that. But one of the things that she found is that people that make an impact know what their boss's priorities are and try to help make those happen. And that's as simple as kind of asking a question. Okay, so hey, what's really important to you right now? Now that may or may not be exactly aligned with the types of things that you're assigned to do, whatever. But what I found, I got a new boss about 18 months ago. And one of the things that I did immediately is I asked her, hey, Marcy, what are your top priorities? And that has been so helpful for me to know like what's on her mind. And then I look at like my team and say, how do we help with that? Some of them directly relate to us, and other things we've just found different ways to say, how can we push those priorities forward and just help out, and even in small ways. So I highly recommend this. The other thing too is if you're leading a team, let them know what your priorities are. You know, like here's what's important to me. Let them know. You know, so both of those ways, I feel like can help them to make an impact as well. The second thing is just to be someone that solves the problems, right? It's easy to point out the problems, you know, to say, hey, this isn't working right or whatever, you know, like we got plenty of Karens, you know, to point them out, but how can we solve them? What's something that I can do to make it easier? And I think that's just a helpful thing. Kind of going along with that is being proactive in doing this. We don't always need to wait for somebody to ask us to do something. And we can do that. I think one of the best things that Liz Wiseman suggests is just try to make work light for others. And I think that's a great way to make an impact and to just do things that are good and helpful, and that ultimately will be important for them. So anyway, I love that book. Those are a few things out of it that were really helpful for me but the whole concept of being an impact player as opposed to just kind of doing good work. I mean, that's important, but how do we really, if you want to really make a difference, you know, there's a few things that we can do and to do that. Okay, so let's turn back. I talked about this a little bit before, but let's go back to email. Anybody? Hopefully nobody has a count that high. Not a contest, by the way. But email is fascinating to me. I don't know why. And it's, you know, of course, we've talked about how it's never done, but here's what I'd like you to do, just at your table, or just maybe if you're online, just check, go to your inbox, and let's see, you know, just kind of as you're thinking about this, what do you when do you first check your email in the day? So just ask just a neighbor, or just kind of note if you're online, maybe you could pop it in the chat. When do you check your email first? When do you first look at it? Ask a neighbor here.
How much email, work email.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do look at it, sometimes I won't like, I'm like, oh, okay, I have these, I'll look at it later.
I'm interested to see like I'll generally when I pick up my phone, I check if there's something there, but I don't read it unless I. Yeah, or like, yes, that I know that it's something. Yeah.
I don't get.
Well, I try to. I'm just like that, just like other email.
Okay.
Seeing, I was like, hey, we have that's fine.
As soon as I'm on my computer.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think? When do you first do that?
Wait, what?
When you first check your email?
Well,
Is anybody laying in bed? Like, checking their email already? Yeah, super common. We're gonna do, it might be just the first thing you do when you sit down to your computer. Or, I mean, it's even easier now with a phone, right? Just, oh, look, I have 285,000. Yeah, now that's interesting. So when we do that, and the reason why I brought up like kind of that tool at the beginning and everything is when we do that, what now is setting your agenda? It's that email. So if you're starting your day with other people's priorities coming at you like that, that's where your focus and your thoughts are going to go. So, you know, and that's why often we will run our to-dos out of our inbox, you know, and thinking about that. And so, you know, what we want to do is, again, that's why that tool is super important. And what I would suggest is checking that first, putting off the email, just put off, you'll still get to it. But just kind of focusing on, hey, where's my calendar? What do I have today? Like remind myself that, what have I got? And then looking at your priorities. Okay, let's see if I could get started on one of these just before I check, just even 10 minutes. Like, let's look at this. That's going to make a big difference. The other thing that I think with this is that this is something that we can marginally get better at. You know, become kind of an email pro. You know, you can learn the keyboard shortcuts and do those different things. You can batch those. I think that's an important thing. Just kind of spend time doing it instead of doing it continually. I love templates that you can use for responses or auto responses. I think ChatGPT has a lot of possibility here with writing emails and helping you to do that too. But again, what can you control? I can't control if people are. Is it kind of weird to think about that anybody in the world could send you a message to interrupt your work at any time? That's a weird when you think about it. Like, why do we let that happen, right? So you are the gatekeeper here. Right? You're the gatekeeper. Now, you do have to have conversations with your coworkers and your team members and say, how are we going to communicate? What's our response time? And I think it's good to have norms and kind of do that. And it shouldn't be, yeah, if I send an email at midnight, I want you to respond right now. You know, that's ridiculous. You know, talk about that. Talk about the norms. So, you know, what are the expectations around that? But I think we can control certain aspects of that, and part of it is just saying, here's when I will dedicate time to do this and looking at it. So think through those. Think about how we're using this. It shouldn't dominate our lives like it sometimes does. But remember, when you get up in the morning, resist the urge. Look at your priorities. Do your maybe your morning routine. Get that done. There's plenty of time to check that email later. I think that's a good one. Okay, now the other thing that I think is helpful in focusing, because we're talking about focus. So this is the focus taker, I feel like, email. So you can kind of deal with that in a certain way. Another thing that we can do is just daily check in with your projects. Now that might be the 3 things that you're working on. You might be working on more projects than that, but just kind of say, where am I? You know, what's the status? What's the next thing that I need to do to move forward with those? Okay, I find that it's super helpful sometimes to get a visual on our projects. So every once in a while, I'll just get a big sheet of paper and some sticky notes and start. So, okay, what are all the projects I have to work on? And what this does is it helps you to kind of remember what are all the things I've committed to doing. And then I can kind of move it into something a little bit more formatted like this, and I can prioritize and be like, here's where I am. And then if somebody comes and tells me, hey, Greg, I need you to do this project, I can say, okay, these are the ones that I'm working on right now. Which of these would you like me to bump in order to get this done? I've had several times where the person's like, I'm gonna go ask somebody else. So, but you know, like, you can't have that conversation unless you know what you've committed to do and what you're doing. And often what happens is we don't keep very good track. We're not good at tracking that in ourselves so that we overcommit. Okay, a couple of just last points here is thinking about it. I think that's a helpful tool, but the other thing I always want to remember is just when you're focusing, one of the things to focus on is just people in general. In the end, all we have is relationships. My father-in-law is an attorney, and it's interesting. He said that of all the things that we have, he said being a lawyer is customer service, because it's all about the relationships. I mean, yeah, I have to do some court stuff and whatever, but it's all about the people. So, you know, we want to find ways to recognize people, to respect people, and look for ways to do that. And I think that's helpful. So the impact of this is you're going to spend your time on things that you can control and things where you can be an impact player. And I think that's what we're striving for. So just to summarize, looking at these things. So here's, going forward, try that 3 things tool. You can do that immediately. Look at that right now. Do it for your afternoon. Try that tomorrow. Figure out, like, is my calendar working? Are there things is it helping me to focus on what I need to focus on? If not, make some adjustments. And then the last thing is just cultivate a mindset of focusing on what you can control. And being intentional about your actions, focusing on the relationships and the things that are super important, looking for ways to just kind of keep working on the things that are important, trying to minimize those things that are distracting you from that. And recognizing that you got to be a little flexible because life is life. So, okay, I hope that's been helpful. Just some things as you're going through school. You're busy people. I'm sure you are more busy than you want to be. But hopefully this can help you as you're trying to focus on what's truly important for you. So thanks for your time.
All right, thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. Students, we will have an online only seminar, and we will send out a reminder with access information next week. But in 2 weeks, we'll be back here in the seminar room for in-person again. And let's have a great lunch. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I see you leave it there.
You know they have cups.
Yeah, I just